When I was a kid, the attic always scared me more than the basement did. Most people have it the other way around, but our attic was unconventional. It was surprisingly spacious. You didn't even have to crouch, but it was built like a makeshift maze. Massive, uneven beams and sudden changes in elevation broke up the space. You couldn't stand in one spot and see from one end to the other. There were always nooks, crannies, and shadows for something to hide in. My parents treated it like a glorified storage room, avoiding it as much as possible. This memory stands out as the one dark spot in an otherwise perfect childhood. It started on a school day. I woke up and noticed the bottoms of my feet were gray and grimy. There was a fine layer of grit between my toes that I couldn't explain. I'd just gone to sleep in my bed. I hadn't been outside. Being a kid, I just washed them and moved on. Then things escalated. A few days later, I found a box of old photographs in my room that belonged in the attic. My mom assumed I'd been rummaging, but I had no memory of it. A week later, an ugly brass lamp from the attic was sitting on my desk. The realization hit me. I wasn't just sleepwalking. I was navigating that pitch-black maze of beams and joists in my sleep. My parents weren't concerned. They said kids grow out of it. But I started to dread bedtime. I'd stay awake for hours, fighting sleep, terrified of what I was doing while I was unconscious. One night I woke up, but I wasn't in my bed. I was standing upright in total, impenetrable darkness. It took a few seconds for the recognition to hit. I was in the attic. The fear was so intense I could barely breathe. I had no light and I didn't know where in the maze I was. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, tears streaming down my face in total silence. And then I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of not being alone. Thud, a soft sound came from behind me. It sounded like a footstep or someone shifting their weight on the floorboards. I moved toward where I thought the hatch was, and I heard the sound again, closer this time. Someone was in the dark with me. I finally found the hatch and scrambled down, hysterical. I woke my parents, begging my dad to check the attic. He went up for 2 minutes and came back down, saying it was empty. He put a lock on the hatch the next day, and the sleepwalking stopped. But I've never been able to accept the normal explanation. How did I navigate that maze in total darkness without ever tripping or getting hurt? And those sounds, I know what I heard. There was something up there waiting for me to wake up. This happened when I was about 15. We lived in an old house that had been in my family for generations. The attic was a graveyard for unwanted furniture and Christmas decorations. That year, my dad sent me up alone to grab the holiday boxes. I made a mess of the place looking for them, moving heavy crates and old trunks. In a far back corner, I spotted something I'd never seen before, a heavy, black document box. It looked much older than anything else up there. Inside were dozens of papers, notebooks, and hand-drawn maps. They were all covered in frantic, tight handwriting. I spent hours up there reading them. It was a diary of someone who had lived in the house long before my grandfather. As I read, the writing became more chaotic. The writer was obsessed with the attic's dimensions. According to their math, the attic was smaller than the house's footprint. There was a missing space, along one wall, several feet that couldn't be accounted for. The entries got darker. The writer started sleeping in the attic, documenting scratching and breathing sounds coming from behind that specific wall. The last pages weren't even words anymore, just rows and rows of tally marks, counting something I couldn't identify. I looked at the wall the writer had been fixated on. My stomach turned when I saw the marks, cracks and indents that lined up exactly with the diary's descriptions. It felt like the writer was standing right behind me. I took the box to my dad. He was stunned. He didn't recognize the handwriting and had no idea the box existed. He took me back up to the attic with a crowbar. He started ripping the wall down. Behind the wood was a hidden room, several feet deep, running the entire length of the attic. There was no door, no windows, no other way in. But the walls of that hidden space were covered in black markings, symbols and shapes that didn't look like any language I'd ever seen. The room was empty, but the implication was terrifying. If there was no entrance, how did someone get in there to draw those symbols? My dad thinks his father found the diary and hidden room years ago and boarded it up to forget it. We moved out shortly after. For all I know, that black box and the symbols are still up there, hidden behind a fresh layer of drywall. Some mysteries are better left buried in the dust. I inherited my parents' three-story colonial house 4 years ago. It's too big for one person, especially after my divorce. To clear my head, I've developed a ritual, a late-night walk around the acre of property while I smoke a cigarette. The house is incredibly old. The floors creak so loudly you can't move without announcing your location. 3 weeks ago, I was doing my usual loop in the backyard when I glanced up at the small attic window. For a split second, I saw movement, a dark shape passing in front of the glass. I froze, staring up, but the window remained dark. I told myself it was a reflection of a cloud or a bat and went inside. The next night I saw it again. This wasn't a reflection. Someone was moving in my attic. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight and pulled down the ladder. I was terrified, but the thought of someone in my house made me angrier than I was scared. I climbed up and stopped at the top rung. The attic was destroyed. Boxes were overturned, bins were smashed. But that wasn't the worst part. Every wall and even the ceiling was smeared with thick, chunky black paint. It was so fresh it was still dripping onto the floorboards. I did a quick sweep. Nobody was there. I scrambled down the ladder, my heart hammering. I grabbed the biggest knife from the kitchen and went back up, screaming like a lunatic to scare whoever it was. I flipped every box, checked every corner. The attic isn't that big. There's nowhere to hide. That's when I saw the new marks. Deep, long gouges in the wooden beams, layered right over the wet paint. Like a massive animal had been clawing at the wood with incredible force. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911. The police searched the entire house and found nothing. They said a homeless person must have snuck in and left through the house while I was in the backyard. But I know this house. I would have heard the floorboards creak if someone had walked through it. I would have heard the front door. I've never gone back into that attic. I haven't even cleaned the paint. I just stay on the first floor, listening to the ceiling, wondering if the scratching is going to start again. The things we store in our attics are usually forgotten, but sometimes they're the ones watching us. Sleep tight. This has been Whispered Night Stories.